we'll move straight to the next item, which is the Chasn's review of Ports of Auckland progress on implementing health and safety. Once again, welcome Chris Levitt as our principal advisor, but also welcome to do the presentation Chris Alderson, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Chasn's, and John Harper-Slade, who's the General Manager of Health and Safety Innovation. Before inviting Chris and John to talk, Chris, would you like to introduce this item? Or actually what I'll do, even before you do that, the motion is to receive the summary from Chasn's, to note the progress, and to thank the representative Chasn's for attending. Can I have someone move that, please?
I'll move that, boss.
Moved by Bill Cashmore, Deputy Mayor. Seconded. Kathy Casey, Councillor Kathy Casey, and Chris. I'll let you introduce the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Obviously connected to the previous item, Construction Health and Safety New Zealand, or Chasn's, undertook their review and were asked at the April governing body meeting to provide a summary of their subsequent review of the progress made by ports. Chasn's were also asked to attend this meeting to speak to that review and answer any questions. Chasn's summary is attached to the report for this item and notes that significant progress has been made by Ports of Auckland and is complementary of the work undertaken by ports and those staff involved. The summary also highlights some areas that need attention, but I will now hand over to Chris and John to take you through their review and answer any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and good morning, everyone. I think it's still morning. Chris Alderson here. I'd also just like to introduce my colleague, John Harper-Slade, who some of you might not have met before. John's one of the 6 chartered fellows of IOSH in New Zealand, so he's a very well-respected and heavily qualified health and safety professional who did most of the work on this review. So any detailed questions, I'll defer to John. So I'll take the summary as read. I think the thinking back, when we first did our review, we obviously gave Ports of Auckland a significant number of recommendations and a significant amount of work to do in this area. And look, we also recognise the fact that this isn't going to happen overnight, and particularly with a new health and safety head of health and safety being appointed almost at the same time as that report was dropped. And I think first of all, we'd really like to reflect on Vanessa and say, look, it's a brave thing you've done to take on such a large piece of work, but our views are that you're handling it well, and we're very glad to hear that that you're going to be elevated to that lead team, because I think it will actually help a lot in terms of just recognising the fact that health and safety is core to your business. So in terms of the focus areas, I guess the key thing, other than what's written in the report already and in the details report around the progress, the key things really to keep watching and the things we would be concerned about looking forward are that areas such as in particular like multi-cargo, that we don't lose focus on that. And multi-cargo, as many of you will know, has got a lot of different tenants that work across that area, and it's an inter-PCBU sort of relationship that's quite complex. And certainly if we saw in the area really across our review that we'd like a little bit more focus on going forward, it would be that one there. It's a little bit like the whack-a-mole game. We've been very focused on what's happened in the past, obviously in the container terminal side of it, but we also need to be very aware that these kinds of issues can actually pop up in other areas as well if we're not paying them attention. So I guess that was the first point. We're very glad to see that the climate survey is being repeated. We see the climate survey and the results of the climate survey also being a very strong lead indicator. So Jan mentioned the fact that they were going to be focusing on lead indicators in the future. Look, the evidence shows that climate surveys like that are very predictive of future accidents and injuries happening. And we'd sort of encourage that focus to be in those climate surveys to be a regular part of the business going forward, and reported through. The strategic plan, as Vanessa talked about, has been very focused on achieving the recommendations, and we see that evolving over time into something a little bit more holistic around not only just dealing with the recommendations that were made, but also looking to the future around where the port's going and future issues as well. So that will take time, but we recognise the fact that the first thing and the first focus was very much in dealing with those recommendations. And lastly, just really we were very happy with the work that's been done on the automation project, and about some of the decisions that's been made there. That was an area of high concern coming out the back of the review, and high risk. And I think the approach that we're seeing now is a lot more consistent with what we'd expect to see on a project of that size, nature, and novelty within an industry like this. So really, that's the summary of our review. I'm happy to take questions for myself and John.
Thank you very much, Chris, much appreciated. And it's a nice, concise summary and report, and we value the independent perspective that you've brought on this, and we certainly value the evidence that you've adduced that there is good progress that has been made, but also your focus on the areas where there needs to be continued focus. So let's take questions. The first question is from Councillor John Watson. Councillor Watson. Sorry, John, you may be on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, not much point talking to yourself, is there, if you want people to hear? So what I just said was your comment in the report about encouraging improvements in the relationship between unions and ports management, and you refer prior to that to speaking to key personnel, working on the ports. So I'm assuming that comment is informed by conversations with the actual union leadership, as well as the people undertaking the reforms on the port itself. Is that right?
Yes. So as part of the review, we did independently, obviously phone primarily the Maritime Union and had a discussion with them directly, and the feedback, was very good, actually. We were surprised at how good it was. And during the course of the field work, John, maybe if you want to just comment on the interactions with the workforce.
Yeah, so as part of the review, we spoke to a wide range of people who were working in the ports, both at a frontline level and at a management level. And that, one of the things we identified, which was really encouraging, was how the safety representatives across the port operations have much closer relationship with the health and safety team, and which has involved one of the union representatives actually joining the health and safety team. So it was really clear from talking to people that the relationships are improving, and that people just tend to be much more optimistic about how the organisation's investing in keeping them safe. So so really, really positive. You can actually, I mean, from a human point of view, just going into the canteen area where the workers are between shifts, just the vibe and the feel is totally different to how it was when I visited the business during the first review. So you can actually feel, really tacitly feel a change at the place. So fantastic.
Okay, so thanks. That's encouraging to hear. Final question, and a specific one, going to your observation about the multi-cargo area, housekeeping. It's described in the report, and how it's untidy and unsatisfactory levels of waste and debris. You also, I think, mentioned in your preliminary comments that the issues there were complex. So could you just expand on that a little bit? On the face of it, you'd think it's a matter of giving it a good clean up and making sure that things are spick and span. Is it a little bit more challenging than that? Because clearly that has implications for health and safety and, culture of the place and everything else. So could you just explain exactly what you mean by that, what has to be done and how straightforward or not is that?
So obviously it's complex because, you're working within a very constrained operating physical environment, and you've got, work coming in the whole time that has to be coordinated with 2 stevedoring companies, MPI, customs, a number of other parties as well, trucking companies coming on and off. And, they're working within those constraints. What we sort of saw was a level of, I guess, you'd call it sort of the outcomes of those constraints were the sort of poor housekeeping, the sort of potential compromises that were being made across the area. Now, I think a lot of those things, absolutely can be improved, within the bounds of those constraints, but it's going to take leadership and communication and agreement between all those parties on site about how that works, because their operations are closely integrated. John, did you have any more comments on that?
Yeah, I think for me, quite right. The things that you see are often symptoms of something else. So, from my experience, when you see an area that looks untidy, that kind of using your health and safety professionals' nose takes you to look what's deeper and underneath. And for me, really, it's around how the leaders of those organisations that work within that multi-cargo area come together to talk about how they meet their ethical responsibilities for leading and delivering health and safety. I think that the conversation historically has been around taking a compliance focus around what should we do, what are our legal requirements as overlapping PCBUs, and the challenge there is that just doesn't go far enough to achieving the right levels of cooperation and acknowledging that different organisations, different responsibilities and different ways of improving that area, and that the things that they do overlap and affect other people. So what I think is the key activity that will improve multi-cargo is the convening of the Health and Safety Leadership Group, which is an action that they've actually picked up on and have convened that group, which is a group that I believe the Chief Operations Officer is chairing. And it's really that improvement of relationships between those organisations will lead to trust on how those organisations work together, which will improve how they learn about how that part of that organisation works, how the part of that facility works, which will lead to some improvement. So it's that learning and improvement process, really. And fundamentally, what also underpins it is that the facility, does show some signs of constraints in terms of age. The state of some of the infrastructure is poor, and we acknowledge that within both reports. And I think we did that compare contrast, which is if you look at the container terminal at Ferguson Wharf and the improvements to the infrastructure that have happened recently, and look at the condition of things like the pavements, and then go to multi-cargo where actually the pavements are actually in quite poor condition. In parts of the facility, we saw things like exposed rails and there were incidents reported of people tripping over and hurting themselves. And so you could really see how it's just a much more difficult area to manage. And without that cooperation between all the organisations, including the Ports of Auckland, you won't really get an improvement.
Thank you very much. Next question, Councillor Kathy Casey.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I had 3 questions, but you've answered the question on unions, you've answered the question on the multi-cargo area, so I only have one left. And it's the need for an overall traffic management plan. Part of the issue at the multi-cargo area was traffic management. And I'm surprised that you don't have an overall ports plan. So how are you achieving that, and what's your timeline in completing it?
So that question's to Wayne, is it? And Wayne and...
Whoever can answer, really.
It might be better if we answer that, if you're okay with that, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the question's more for you, Wayne.
Yeah, no, key focus at the moment, a lot of work done on that traffic management plan. Can you sort of round that detail out, Vanessa?
Yeah, look, so there's probably two key areas of the traffic management, and that was the one focus in that multi-cargo area as a high risk in terms of all of those PCVUs engaging from a traffic side of things. The two key areas are, one, we needed to have a traffic management standard. So just what were the expectations around traffic management right across the ports of Auckland, no matter which area. So we've established a traffic management standard that sets things, very simple things like minimum speed zones, loading areas, expectations when anybody is travelling on the port. The second part is actually identifying improvement plans in terms of traffic areas. Some of that is required new loading zones, as an example, so new safe loading zones where trucks can sort of pull to the side and be able to safely get out and unlock their containers, etc. So it's having some of those key focus areas in those traffic improvement plans. There have been 6 improvement plans created right across the port, and all of those PCVUs have been involved in establishing those improvement plans. We only finalised the standard and the improvement plans in the last 2 weeks, so we're now starting to lead into implementation phase, but very conscious again that implementation needs to be done in consultation engagement with all relevant stakeholders.
Thank you very much for that, Vanessa. Look, if I could just put a question to Chris or John, and it's a question that I put to the ports when they delivered their annual report to us earlier in the week. In the annual report, lost time injury figures for 2021 were 16, which is approximately 3 times the level that they were for the financial years 2017, 2018 and 2019. Do you have as the reviewer, do you have a perspective on what lies behind that reasonably significant increase in lost time injuries?
So I guess a couple of things, Your Worship, is we sort of view lost time injuries very much as a lag indicator, obviously, of things that have happened in the past. And there's a number of reasons why lost time injury rates change, and one is, the culture of reporting as well. So there could have been some, I guess, underreporting in the past, because typically, unless you see, a major change in the amount of activity on the port, they don't tend to jump around that much. We are trying to really work with businesses, particularly in the construction industry, to change the focus away from lost time injuries, because a lot of lost time injuries, when we look at them, aren't that indicative of future significant injuries and fatalities. So the relationship isn't very clear between them, and a lot of time and effort can be spent on chasing down relatively minor lost time injuries that will never result in a fatality or a serious injury. I think the work that the port's doing on focusing on potential is exactly the right way to go. And I think the leading indicators, things like the safety climate, are a lot more should have a lot more attention going forward. That's probably the insight I've got. John, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think just to acknowledge that Chris's comments there, that lost time injury frequency rates in the safety science community, we've been saying this for a long time, and not a reliable indicator of safety. They're actually just it's a productivity measure, and if you were choosing to measure productivity, you wouldn't choose that one. They tend to not be statistically significant. In terms of that, you can't accumulate enough working hours in a year for it to have any meaning. So usually worthwhile, if you're interested in measuring lag indicators, to actually report actual numbers of incidents, and as Vanessa's already pointed out, to call out those ones that have got high potential. Much more useful for the management team and board to focus on those. As Chris mentioned, lead indicators are really the way forwards. However, it always comes with a word of caution, which is that often when organisations try to develop lead indicators, what ends up is that we ended up counting safety work So safety work is the work that we do in the name of safety, and not all the work we do in the name of safety is connected to the safety of the work that people do. So there's a word of caution in developing those lead indicators, is to make sure that they are measurements of capacity within the organisation that has a direct effect on the safety of the work that people do. So it takes some effort to develop those metrics, and I strongly recommend that Ports of Auckland continue in their efforts to develop a balanced scorecard of good lag metrics and strong lead indicators to have a better understanding of the capacities in the business to improve the safety of the work that people do.
Thank you very much. We've got a supplementary to that question from Councillor Casey.
A supplementary to my last question, Mr. Mayor. It was to Chris this time. Chris, in your report, you suggest that Ports of Auckland need some external expertise to draft or to create their overall traffic management plan. Can you just explain that a bit more?
Yes, so it's actually a bit of a specialist area that we've seen in the past. So what we see for traffic management, people who have done that kind of work in the past, what they'll come in and do is, by direct observation, look at all the contentions between the different types of traffic on a specific site. So there is a review period. The process can be learned, but unless you actually have done it before, it's quite a complex process. So our recommendation was to find some experienced people who've done that kind of study in the past.
Thanks very much.
And just to add to that, and during the review, we observed that Ports of Auckland have actually done that they've engaged the right sort of expertise to produce a traffic management plan, and as Vanessa mentioned, are in the process of implementing and acting on that plan now.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. That brings us to the end of questions. So I just want to thank both of you for your contribution, Chris and John. I'm just looking to see if there's any comments that need to be made. I don't think there are further comments from councillors. So I'll put the recommendation, which is to receive the summary, to note the progress, and to thank the representatives from Chesons for attending. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. I declare that carried. And once again, thanks to Chesons for the good work that you've done for us now over a significant period of time. Really has helped make a difference, and also to acknowledge to Ports of Auckland the progress that's been made on your side that gives us a whole lot more confidence about the future in this area, and we hope in all the other challenges that we're facing at the ports at the present time. So thank you very much for that. And councillors, I'm just going to suggest a 5-minute break now before we move on to item number 12. So if we can come back at 12:21, please. Thank you very much. Just stay. You can stay on this channel. There's no change.